Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of clinical precision.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is. The bone is broken.
Right. It's very clear.
Yeah, the diagnostic landscape is binary. It's visible and, comforting in its clarity. But step into the world of organizational truth, into how massive, complex corporations actually prove they are doing what they say they're doing, and, well, that x-ray machine just shatters.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because, you are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely composed of murky waters, competing incentives, and obscured reality.
Exactly.
A company isn't a bone.
Yeah.
It's a sprawling, living network of human beings, layered processes, hidden assumptions, and compounding risks.
Right.
So the tools we use to diagnose a systemic failure in a multinational corporation, they have to be infinitely more nuanced than a simple medical scan.
Which is exactly our mission today. So welcome to your custom deep dive. We are exploring the architecture of truth-seeking within complex systems.
Yeah, specifically by unpacking the newly updated BSEN ISO 19011.2026 guidelines.
Right, and we are zeroing in entirely on the operational engine of this standard, the section dedicated to conducting the audit, which is Clause 6.
Yes, Clause 6 is the meat of the standard.
Grab your notebooks, because today we are acting as your instructors and class is officially in session. We are going to walk you through the actual boots-on-the-ground playbook that professionals use to verify reality.
From the moment an assignment is initiated to the final verification of a fix.
Exactly. Whether you are prepping to evaluate a massive supplier or expecting to be audited by a regulatory body, or, you're just fascinated by how we extract verifiable facts from corporate environments, this is your definitive roadmap.
Because the theoretical principles of auditing, like integrity, fair presentation, independence, they're beautiful on paper.
Oh, sure. Very noble.
But they mean absolutely nothing until they are tested in a messy, unpredictable, real-world environment. That is what we are mapping out today, the transition from theory to the actual physical act of gathering evidence.
To make this tangible, we are going to use a continuous, realistic scenario throughout this deep dive.
I like that.
Yeah, let's imagine a massive, multinational lithium-ion battery manufacturer. Let's say they operate a gigafactory in Nevada, producing power cells for electric vehicles globally.
Okay, big stakes, high risk.
Huge stakes. And the audit doesn't begin when someone walks through the front doors of that factory. It actually begins with a structural shift in authority.
Right.
The standard dictates that the responsibility for the audit is immediately handed to the designated audit team leader, and it stays with them until the final paperwork is filed.
The team leader basically becomes the single point of failure and the ultimate arbiter of the process.
They're the captain of the ship.
Exactly. From the moment the initiation phase begins, they carry the full weight of the audit's integrity. They aren't just an administrator, they are the judge.
And the very first thing this judge has to do is establish formal contact with the auditee. So the site director of our battery plant gets a formal communication outlining the audit's objectives, the scope, the criteria, and the communication channels.
Right, the 6.2.2 requirements.
Yeah. And I always used to wonder why this initial outreach had to be so rigid. You'd think a simple introductory phone call would suffice to just get the ball rolling,
Well, a casual introduction is really the first step toward a compromised audit.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, this formal contact dictates the survival of the entire endeavor. You are requesting access to highly sensitive information. In the case of our battery plant, you're asking for proprietary chemical mixture data, supplier contracts, internal risk assessments regarding thermal runaway hazards.
Right, stuff they do not want getting out.
Exactly. You are confirming statutory requirements and locking in confidentiality agreements before a single piece of data changes hands.
I see. So it prevents that mid-audit realization that, oh, wait, you aren't allowed into the server room. It's kind of like planning a major wilderness expedition. You have to establish radio protocols with Basecamp, confirm your mapping coordinates, and verify your weather telemetry before you ever step onto the trail.
That's a great way to look at it.
Because if you wait until you are lost in a ravine to figure out your radio doesn't have the right encryption key, you are finished.
Yeah, and setting boundaries early also forces the auditee to recognize the authority of the audit. You are determining location-specific arrangements for access, health, safety, and security.
Which in a battery plant is no joke.
Not at all. In a lithium battery plant, auditors might need specialized flame retardant gear, static dissipative footwear, and biometric security clearances just to walk the production floor.
Wow.
You cannot negotiate those logistics with a confused security guard at the front gate on a Tuesday morning.
No, definitely not. But what happens when the pushback is less about physical access and more about the people conducting the audit?
Oh, that happens a lot.
Because the standard requires the team leader to resolve issues regarding the composition of the audit team during this phase. Let's say the battery plant manager looks at the roster and flat out refuses to let one of your auditors on site.
Okay, why?
Well, the manager claims this specific auditor used to consult for a rival battery company 3 years ago, so there's a risk of intellectual property theft. But the team leader knows this auditor is the only person qualified to understand the specific electrolyte filling process they need to evaluate. Who yields there?
Well, the team leader cannot simply bulldoze their way through that objection. The standard explicitly accounts for this kind of friction.
Okay.
If the auditee has a documented concern about impartiality, the team leader has to engage the individual managing the audit program or the audit client to address it.
So they have to take it seriously.
Absolutely. The integrity of the audit relies entirely on the perception of independence. If the auditee believes the auditor is a corporate spy, well, every piece of evidence gathered will be contested.
And the final conclusions will just be dismissed.
Exactly. The team leader might have to replace that team member or alter the scope entirely.
Which brings us to the feasibility of the audit itself. You have to determine if there is reasonable confidence that the audit objectives can actually be achieved.
Yes. Clause 6.2.3.
And this isn't just about whether the site manager is willing to cooperate, right? The standard specifically flags local, regional, or world events that would affect the scheduled audit.
Because reality frequently intrudes on the most carefully designed audit plans. You are evaluating whether you have adequate time, resources, and cooperation, but you are also evaluating the external environment.
Give me an example.
Well, what if our Nevada battery plant is currently experiencing a massive labor strike, and the production lines you need to observe are being operated by temporary scab labor who don't even know the standard operating procedures?
Right. Or what if a global supply chain crisis means they haven't received lithium shipments in 3 weeks? So the highly dangerous chemical mixing process you were sent to audit is completely dormant.
Exactly. You can't audit a process that isn't running.
So what's the actionable takeaway there?
The mandate from the standard is binary here. If it is not feasible, the audit halts.
It just stopped.
It stops. The team leader does not push through to conduct a terrible, incomplete audit just to satisfy a schedule. An alternative is proposed in agreement with the auditee.
Because conducting an audit under impossible constraints yields fabricated data.
Which is far more dangerous than no data at all.
Totally. Okay, so assuming the environment is stable, the plant is running, and contact is established, the audit moves into the preparation phase.
Yes, moving to 6.3.
The team transitions from establishing feasibility to building the blueprint, and this starts with a comprehensive review of documented information. Their management system, documents, records, and previous audit reports.
And this step is fundamentally misunderstood by a lot of organizations.
Oh, so?
They assume the auditors are just doing some light reading to familiarize themselves with the company vocabulary.
Just skimming the brochures.
Right. But in reality, the audit team is mapping the terrain to identify inherent risks and detect possible areas of concern. They are looking for the shadows before they even arrive on site.
So you are searching for discrepancies in their own narrative.
Exactly.
So if the battery plant safety manual mandates a complete flushing of the chemical lines every 48 hours, but their maintenance logs from the past 6 months show gaps of up to a week, well, you haven't just found a typo.
No, you have not.
You have found the exact coordinate where you are going to focus your investigation.
And that's exactly what allows the team leader to implement a risk-based approach to planning. The standard mandates that the audit focus must be prioritized based on factors like process complexity, past customer complaints, or past audit findings.
It reminds me of a triage nurse in an emergency room.
That's a perfect analogy.
Like, a triage nurse doesn't treat every incoming patient with equal time and resources. If someone walks in with a paper cut and another person is wheeled in with cardiac arrest, the nurse doesn't address the paper cut first just because they arrived earlier.
Right. You prioritize the risk.
In a massive facility like a gigafactory, you do not spend 3 hours verifying the office supply purchasing process while only spending 20 minutes on the hazardous waste containment protocols.
No, you direct your limited resources toward the areas most likely to cause a catastrophic systemic failure.
And this optimization of resources dictates the specific details of the audit plan, right?
Yes. The blueprint outlines the scope, the criteria, the physical and virtual locations to be audited, the expected duration of activities, and the allocation of resources.
Okay, so once that detailed itinerary is constructed, the team leader has to assign the work.
Right, assigning specific processes or locations to team members based on their competence, objectivity, and impartiality.
But this isn't a rigid set-in-stone roster, is it?
Not at all. The standard emphasizes that these work assignments can change as the audit progresses to ensure the objectives are met.
It requires continuous situational awareness.
Very much so. Let's say one auditor finishes reviewing the shipping manifests early, but another auditor has stumbled into a massive, tangled web of nonconformities in the cleanroom environment.
Oh, boy.
Right, and they need immediate backup to verify a mountain of flawed data. The team leader reallocates personnel on the fly.
Makes sense. Now, the final step of this preparation phase is creating the documented information for the audit, the checklists, the sampling details, the audiovisual aids.
Right.
And I have always viewed the checklist with a healthy dose of skepticism, to be honest.
Ooh, why is that?
Well, if you hand an auditor a rigid checklist, doesn't it inadvertently turn them into a robot? Like, if they smell something inherently wrong, but it isn't a line item on their clipboard, the checklist creates an incentive to just ignore it and move on to the next box.
You know, the architects of the standard anticipated that exact psychological trap.
Oh, they did.
Yeah. The text explicitly states that the use of these media should not restrict the extent of auditing activities, which can change as a result of information collected during the audit.
Ah, okay, so it's a baseline.
It's a safety net, not a straitjacket. It ensures you don't forget to ask about the mandatory fire suppression tests, but your professional judgment is what allows you to pull the thread when you notice the operator's hands are shaking when they talk about those tests.
Wow. The working documents serve the auditor never serves the document.
Exactly.
Okay, so the blueprint is complete, the checklists are printed, the team physically arrives at the Nevada Gigafactory. We are transitioning into the core of the fieldwork, the actual conduct of the auditing activities.
Section 6.4.
Yes, boots on the ground. And before the investigation even starts, the team leader has to establish the rules of engagement with the guides and observers assigned by the auditee.
Right, because you are rarely allowed to wander a billion-dollar facility unescorted. The auditee provides guides to facilitate access.
And the psychological and operational boundaries established here are critical, right?
Absolutely critical. Guides assist in identifying individuals for interviews, they unlock restricted doors, and they ensure the audit team doesn't accidentally wander into a high-voltage testing zone.
Always a plus.
But they're strictly forbidden from influencing or interfering with the audit itself.
Because the guide is always tempted to control the narrative, I can just picture it. You ask a junior machine operator how often they calibrate the electrolyte pump. The operator hesitates, and the guide immediately jumps in with, "Oh, he calibrates it every morning at 6 a.m. according to Protocol 4B.
And the auditor must instantly shut that down.
Yeah.
Yes. The guide is not the one being audited. If a manager from another department is tagging along as an observer and begins arguing with the auditor about how a question is phrased, the team leader has the explicit authority to deny that observer presence during the activities.
Really? Just kick them out of the room.
If necessary, yes. The purity of the evidence collection requires hearing from the actual source, unvarnished and unprompted.
Okay, so with the boundaries drawn, the team moves into the conference room for the opening meeting. This is the formal kickoff.
Chaired by the team leader and attended by the plant's top management.
And even if this is an internal audit where everyone knows each other, this procedural step cannot be skipped. It is the pre-flight safety briefing.
Exactly. The degree of formality might scale based on familiarity, but the core elements are non-negotiable.
What are those core elements?
Well, the team leader confirms the audit plan, introduces the team, and ensures that all planned activities can be executed. You outline the scope and criteria. You establish the formal communication channels. You explain how findings will be reported.
Okay.
And crucially, you define the conditions under which the audit could be terminated. You are removing all ambiguity about how the next few days will unfold.
And one of the most intense aspects of how those days unfold is the protocol for communication during the audit. The team has to meet periodically to assess progress, obviously.
Yes.
But the standard outlines specific scenarios where routine communication is entirely insufficient.
This is a huge point. If the audit team uncovers evidence suggesting an immediate and significant risk, it must be reported without delay to the auditee and the audit client.
Let's apply that to the battery plant. Say you are walking through the testing bay, and you notice a prototype lithium cell is expanding, venting gas, and reading at a critically high temperature. Thermal runaway is imminent.
Oh, a nightmare scenario.
Right. You do not jot that down on your clipboard, wait for the closing meeting on Friday, and politely include it in a PowerPoint presentation. You pull the red alarm instantly.
Because auditing principles, confidentiality, and procedural schedules never supersede immediate human safety or catastrophic organizational risk.
Never.
Furthermore, if the audit objectives suddenly become unattainable, say a server crash wiped out the last 6 months of quality control data you were supposed to evaluate, the team leader must report the reasons immediately to determine the next actions.
So you either alter the scope of the audit on the spot or you terminate it entirely.
Right, because you cannot audit a ghost.
Which ties directly into how auditors actually access information. The standard notes that auditing involves a mixture of methods that dynamically shift between physical and virtual locations.
A modern audit is really a hybrid investigation.
Yeah, I imagine.
You might be standing on the factory floor interviewing a shift supervisor about chemical storage, and an hour later, you are sitting in a secure room on a video call with a cloud architect in another time zone, reviewing the encrypted access logs for the automated mixing software.
It's wild. The auditor has to be procedurally fluent across all domains of the organization's infrastructure.
They do.
This brings us to the actual mechanics of the investigation, the detective work. How does an auditor extract the truth from this massive apparatus?
Well, it begins with reviewing documented information concurrently with the active audit. You aren't just relying on the pre-investigation anymore.
So you are constantly cross-referencing observed reality against the established paperwork.
Exactly. You watch a technician load a pallet of battery cells into a curing oven. You immediately request the documented procedure for that exact loading process.
Okay. And if the technician stacked them 5 high, but the manual explicitly limits the stack to 3 to prevent weight crush hazards.
You have a discrepancy.
Right there.
And if the organization drags its feet and fails to provide that manual in a timely manner, well, the team leader has the authority to suspend the audit. Without the criteria, you cannot evaluate the reality.
Wow. Okay, so the epistemology of auditing, how we fundamentally know what we know, is mapped out in the standards process for collecting and verifying information.
Yes, section 6.4.7.
It relies on a highly specific flow of logic to prevent assumptions from masquerading as facts. It's a rigorous 5-step distillation process.
Do you want to break down those steps?
Yeah, let's do it. You begin with a source of information. From that source, you collect data by means of appropriate sampling. That sample becomes your audit evidence. You then evaluate that evidence against the predetermined audit criteria. And the result of that evaluation produces the audit findings.
It's beautifully logical. Let's run the battery plant through that exact filter.
Let's do it.
The source is the safety training department. The collection via sampling means you randomly select 50 personnel files from the hazardous materials team.
Okay, got the files.
The audit evidence is the discovery that 12 of those 50 files contain expired certifications for handling toxic solvents.
Yikes.
The evaluation is comparing those 12 expired files against the regulatory criteria that mandates 100% active certification.
And the audit finding
is a severe nonconformity regarding personnel competency and statutory compliance.
The architecture of that process really prevents emotional or biased conclusions.
It does. But the critical linchpin in that flow is verification. The standard unequivocally states that only information that can be subject to some degree of verification should be accepted as audit evidence.
And this is where the reality of human behavior clashes with the framework.
Oh, all the time.
What happens when the information is pure hearsay? Like, imagine an auditor is getting coffee in the break room, and a mid-level engineer leans in and whispers that the quality assurance manager is actively ordering the team to falsify the temperature logs on the curing ovens to speed up production.
That is a massive fraudulent risk.
Huge. But it's a rumor. Does the auditor just ignore it because it isn't documented? Sounds like we're building a legal case here.
It is an epistemology exercise.
Mm-hmm.
We are separating rumor from verifiable fact.
Yeah.
So you never ignore it, but you do not treat it as evidence.
Okay, so what do you do?
A whispered rumor is a source of information. It directs your investigation. You use that rumor to target your sampling.
Ah, right.
You go to the curing ovens, you request the digital temperature logs from the internal software, and then you cross-reference them against the raw energy draw from the utility meters for those specific ovens.
Oh, that's smart.
If the logs claim the ovens were at 400 degrees for 6 hours, but the energy draw shows a massive drop during that exact window, you now have verifiable evidence of falsification.
Wow. So you transform the hearsay into a verifiable fact through targeted sampling.
Exactly. And if you couldn't prove the logs were faked, you couldn't write the finding. The auditor is a seeker of verifiable reality, not a collector of office gossip.
And once that reality is verified, you generate the audit findings. The evaluated evidence indicates either conformity, meaning the system is working as intended, or nonconformity.
But nonconformities are not created equal.
Right.
The standard allows for grading them quantitatively or qualitatively, depending on the context of the organization.
Like a missing signature on a routine daily cleaning log for the warehouse floor is a minor nonconformity. It's a lapse in discipline.
Exactly. But bypassing the pressure release valve on a lithium mixing tank is a major catastrophic nonconformity. Grading communicates the exact severity of the risk to the organization's leadership.
The standard provides an incredibly valuable mandate regarding these findings. Nonconformities must be reviewed with the auditee to obtain acknowledgement that the evidence is accurate. But what happens when the auditee completely rejects the premise? The plant manager looks at the energy draw discrepancies and says, "Your analysis is flawed, our logs are accurate, I reject this finding."
Well, every attempt must be made to resolve diverging opinions concerning the evidence. And notice the phrasing, concerning the evidence, not the finding itself.
Oh, that's a key distinction.
The manager might furiously debate the severity of the issue, but the auditor must focus on establishing mutual reality. Like, do we agree that this utility meter shows a drop in energy?
Right.
If the auditee absolutely refuses to accept the factual evidence, the unresolved issue must be formally recorded. The auditor doesn't back down or delete the finding just to smooth things over.
You just document the disagreement.
Yeah.
Management disputes the utility data, but the data was verified.
Exactly.
So, the fieldwork is now drawing to a close. The evidence is gathered, the findings are generated, and the unresolved disputes are recorded. But the team cannot just pack their laptops and head to the airport.
No, the job isn't done.
They must prepare to face the auditee's leadership. We enter the final phases of the on-site operation, reaching conclusions and conducting the closing meeting.
Before engaging the auditee, the audit team isolates themselves to confer. They review the findings against the objectives, agree on the overarching conclusions, and prepare any recommendations, provided the audit plan explicitly asks for them.
Because the conclusions elevate the perspective from individual findings to the systemic level. You aren't just presenting a list of broken rules, you are evaluating the robustness of the entire management system.
That's right.
If you found minor documentation errors in the HR department, the shimming department, and the hazardous waste department, the conclusion isn't that 3 departments made mistakes.
No, the conclusion is that the central document control framework of the entire company is deteriorating. You connect the dots.
However, there is a profound philosophical boundary outlined in the standard regarding recommendations. It explicitly states that caution should be used when making recommendations to avoid any negative impact on impartiality.
This is one of the most counterintuitive aspects of the profession.
I'll say, if I am an expert auditor and I see that their document control system is failing and I know a specific software platform that would instantly solve their problem, why shouldn't I tell them to buy it? Isn't withholding that solution essentially sabotaging the client?
It feels like withholding help, I know. But offering the solution destroys the fundamental utility of the audit. An auditor acts as a mirror, not a consultant.
A mirror?
Yes, your sole objective is to provide a flawless reflection of the organization's current state. If you step out of the mirror, diagnose the problem, and then prescribe the exact cure, telling them to buy software XYZ, you have irreparably compromised yourself.
Because when I return next year to conduct the annual surveillance audit...
You are no longer an independent observer. You are auditing your own solution.
Oh, wow.
If the software is failing, human nature will tempt you to subconsciously minimize those failures because you recommended it. The organization must take total ownership of developing and implementing their own corrective actions. The separation of church and state must be absolute.
That distinction preserves the integrity of the entire industry. I love that.
It really does.
So, with the conclusions drawn and the boundaries respected, the team proceeds to the closing meeting. This is the moment of truth, chaired by the team leader and attended by top management, often including the CEO or board members of the auditee.
And the objective is to present the findings and conclusions in a way that they are entirely understood and formally acknowledged.
This meeting requires supreme diplomatic and authoritative skill, primarily because it involves communicating crucial disclaimers.
Yes. The team leader must advise the auditee of any situations encountered that decrease confidence in the conclusions. Like, if a key subject matter expert was hospitalized and unavailable for interview, that gap in the data must be declared.
But the most vital disclaimer, one that defines the limits of human knowledge in this context, is that the audit evidence was based on a sample of available information. Therefore, there is inherent uncertainty.
It is an exercise in intellectual honesty. You are looking the CEO in the eye and stating, we did not read every single email, we did not test every single battery cell, we did not observe every shift.
Right.
We utilized statistical sampling to build a highly confident model of your reality, but we do not possess omniscient certainty.
You are providing the best possible map of the territory while explicitly reminding them it is still just a map.
Exactly. And this is also the final arena for conflict resolution.
What happens if the CEO is furious and completely rejects a major nonconformity regarding their safety protocols?
Well, the standard is unwavering. Diverging opinions are discussed. If they remain unresolved, they are recorded.
You don't back down.
The auditor does not soften the language or retract a verifiable finding just because the person across the table has immense institutional power or is raising their voice. Importantly, the auditee is also formally informed of the appeals process. There is a systemic, documented pathway for handling disputes that transcends a shouting match in a conference room.
The closing meeting adjourns. The auditee is left to process the reality of their organization. The team heads home. But the audit is not complete until the loop is closed on paper.
Right, the paperwork.
We arrive at the final requirements, preparing the report, completing the audit, and conducting the follow-up. Sections 6.5, 6.6, and 6.7.
The preparation and distribution of the audit report is the ultimate responsibility of the team leader. It must be a complete, accurate, concise, and clear record of the entire endeavor.
It documents the objectives, the scope, the findings, the conclusions, and a definitive statement on the degree to which the criteria have been fulfilled.
It is the permanent historical record.
Yeah.
But the standard includes a vital, strict rule to prevent foul play here.
Which is?
Nonconformities that have not been presented and discussed during the audit or the closing meeting should not be included in the audit report.
No surprise attacks permitted.
Absolutely no surprise attacks. An auditor cannot smile, nod, and shake hands during the closing meeting, fly back to their office, and write a scathing report filled with severe nonconformities that the auditee has never seen.
That kind of ambush just destroys trust. It violates the core principle of fair presentation, and critically, it prevents the auditee from immediately addressing potentially catastrophic risks.
Exactly. Everything must be laid out on the table while you are in the room.
Right. Once drafted, the report is dated, reviewed, and distributed within an agreed time frame using stringent confidentiality measures.
Which transitions seamlessly into the formal completion of the audit.
So when is it technically done?
The audit is technically complete when all planned activities have been carried out. But the post-audit responsibilities regarding data security are immense.
I mean, you just spent 2 weeks downloading trade secrets, reviewing internal disciplinary files, and analyzing proprietary chemical formulas.
Right, so the documented information must be retained or disposed of properly. The audit team is strictly prohibited from disclosing any information obtained during the audit to any other party without explicit approval from the client and the auditee.
So you can't just tweet about it.
Definitely not. The confidentiality binding doesn't evaporate when the final invoice is paid. It is perpetual. An auditor carrying an unencrypted laptop with the Nevada Gigafactory's complete risk matrix is a massive liability.
Oh, for sure. So the final piece of the puzzle is conducting the audit follow-up. Because a rigorous audit almost always uncovers systemic flaws that require corrections or long-term corrective actions.
Remembering our mandate to remain a mirror, it is the auditee who decides on these actions and undertakes them. It is their responsibility to redesign the failing safety protocols or implement a new document control system.
But the auditor's final role is verification. The completion and the effectiveness of those corrective actions must be verified. If the battery plant promises they fixed the falsified temperature log issue by installing unalterable hardwired sensors on the ovens, the auditor has to prove that fix actually works.
Exactly. Sometimes this requires the auditee to submit video evidence and data logs. Sometimes it requires a physical visit during a subsequent audit to pull the new data samples. The loop must be closed.
Because if the loop isn't closed, the management system never improves.
Right. An audit without rigorous follow-up is nothing more than a very expensive list of complaints. The follow-up is what forces the organization to actually evolve.
Wow. We have mapped the entire sequence. We've walked from the initial formal contact through the psychological friction of the guides into the rigorous epistemology of sampling evidence, and finally through the friction of the closing meeting and the permanent record of the report.
It's a journey. And Clause 6 is the framework that allows us to extract verifiable reality from organizations that are inherently designed to protect their own narratives.
It is an engine for organizational honesty. It takes human bias, self-preservation, and assumption, and replaces them with a ruthless, step-by-step verification mechanism. It strips away the office gossip and demands evidence.
It proves that while we may never achieve omniscient certainty, we can build a process that gets us incredibly close to the truth.
Which leaves a final thought for you to consider. We spent this time breaking down how professional auditors enforce reality in billion-dollar corporations.
Right.
But look at your own environment, your team, your business, your daily workflows. How often do you operate on assumptions instead of verifiable evidence?
It's a great question.
When a crisis happens, do you just accept the narrative you are handed? Or do you sample the data, verify the source, and map the root cause? What would change if you applied the rigorous bias-removing steps of this standard to the way you evaluate information in your own life?
Things might look very different.
When your diagnostic X-ray machine breaks down, what is your framework for finding the truth? Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today into the architecture of truth-seeking.